Welcome everyone. Turn the music down a little bit. I have stuff falling down. I have an exciting stream today. This is going to be about a pretty interesting topic. Hopefully, a lot of people will find interesting as well. Now, a lot of people have heard about Leviathan. Now, I have a video from my old channel which I'm going to re-upload dedicated to Leviathan, all the scriptural mentions of Leviathan from the Bible, from I think the book of Enoch and other sources, Jewish sources and stuff. So I'm not going to focus much on Leviathan here in this video. I might refer, to general descriptions about it, but I'm not going to get into detail. But for this video here, I want to focus more on the fact that it's a biblical prophecy that in the end days, like when the end days themselves are here with the times of Armageddon and everything, excuse me, it's actually a fact that the Leviathan will appear, okay? And not just the Leviathan, but the Behemoth and a great giant bird called the Ziz. A lot of people don't know this. And the biblical prophecy, which is very, very vague, and it's expanded upon in other books like Book of Enoch and Jewish literature, okay? But founded on the prophecy that's in Psalms. I can read it in a little bit, right? But in the end days, these three great monsters, titanic monsters, right? Just like from a Godzilla movie, are going to be coming out and doing battle on the earth. Are they going to be fighting each other? Some of the sources say that they will. Leviathan will fight Behemoth, stuff like that. But other sources also say that they'll be attacking, civilization. Okay, it could be possible they'll be fighting each other and just attacking, whatever's around them at the same time. But the very, very interesting thing about the biblical prophecy is that it is Messiah and God who actually slay Leviathan and probably Behemoth as well, and the Ziz. Okay, I don't conclusively know the fate of the Ziz. Actually, no, I'm wrong. I do. Correct myself there. Okay, these three creatures are going to be slain by God and Jesus, okay, the Messiah, when they come in the end days, in this great apocalyptic battle, while everything else is going on as well, okay? And the incredible thing is that the flesh of these creatures, I don't know about Behemoth, but with Leviathan and with the Ziz bird, their flesh will actually be served at a great feast. Okay, and this is part of the biblical prophecy from the book of Psalms, I believe it is. That's quite incredible. Now, some sources that I've read talk about that the flesh of Leviathan and even the flesh of the giant Ziz bird, that they actually have qualities of immortal nature. So that when you eat the flesh, it's quite likely that you're going to gain immortality from it. Now, this isn't something that can be, 100% conclusively proven. In the Bible, there is not much written. In the Bible, it does talk about Leviathan, Behemoth, and believe it or not, it does talk about the Ziz bird in two places. A lot of people aren't aware of that. It does talk about the prophecy of the fact that Leviathan will be served up as food, okay? And you have to go into the Jewish sources and the book of Enoch to get any extra information, okay? But the Jews and Christians, most people accept that the book of Enoch is legit anyways. And I mean the real book, not the spurious one. Okay, so technically you could argue it is totally scriptural, all right? But it's just an incredible thing to just, imagine this happening, this great battle, just like from the movies with the kaiju giant monsters, right? This will really take place. But supposedly there's only one of each of the creatures, which oddly again is kind of like the Godzilla movies. In the Godzilla movies you have Godzilla, who would be the equivalent of Leviathan. You have Rodan, who would be the equivalent of the giant Ziz bird. And Behemoth could be any number of, one of the other opponents. But Behemoth has giant horns. Now, even the Jews cannot agree on what Leviathan is. Some say a giant fish. The Bible makes it quite clear it's got 7 heads and it's a dragon and it breathes fire. Last time I checked, fish don't do that. Okay, so, and unfortunately, a lot of the Jewish literature, especially when it gets into like more mythical type stuff. I'm not saying it's a lie because it's mythical, but they tend to go a little bit overboard with goofiness. So just looking at what we can see as being credible, the Leviathan is a giant dragon. That's biblical. The Behemoth, no one really knows. The Jews think it's a giant ox. There were giant oxes noted in the Hindu religion and in the Egyptian religion, culture / religion. But I don't think a giant ox is menacing enough. I mean, I'm sure if there was a Titan-sized bull, that would probably be one of the most scary things on earth. But I don't know. Maybe it's some other type of creature. I mean, who knows? But the Ziz bird, there's a fair amount of information and description on the Ziz bird from other sources. So I've got some scripture here to read and just general writing about them as well. It's be interesting to go over. Now, let me get a sip of my coffee. The Ziz bird. Like I said, I have a whole other video dedicated to Leviathan I made like a year ago. It's got older verses in there. So I'm going to put that video up separately. So I'm not going to really focus on Leviathan. More so on the giant Ziz bird in this video here. Now, the Ziz bird is a giant, supposedly griffin-like bird in Jewish mythology. And it's said to be large enough that it can block the sun when it spreads its wings. Okay? Now, before you all start going, sounds like a bunch of nonsense, right? Bear with me here, because this same creature is talked about in a lot of world cultures with shocking, unique similarities. Okay? And remember, there's only one giant Ziz bird. There aren't loads and loads of them. Okay? Now, the Ziz bird also has other names. It's known as the bar Juchne, Juchne, and it's also, a lot of people say it's probably the roc, R-O-C, from Arabian mythology, right? That giant bird, like a giant eagle or whatever, that could swoop down and pick up elephants and stuff, right? That was the roc. So it says here in the description that the Ziz is considered as a giant animal or monster corresponding to the archetypal, I can't say that word, I don't know why, archetype, but a different tense, archetypal creatures. Rabbis have said that the Ziz is comparable to the Persian Simurgh, while modern scholars compare the Ziz to the Sumerian Anzu and the Greek Phoenix. There is only passing mention of the Ziz in the Bible, found in Psalms 50 verse 11, where it says, "I know all the birds of the mountains, and Ziz Sadeh is mine." That's interesting. So God is claiming that the giant Ziz bird is his. That's kind of interesting. In Psalms 80 verse 13 and 14, it says, "The boar from the forest ravages it, and Ziz Sadeh feeds on it." Now, let me go open that up because I was curious to see what the "it" is there. Psalms 80 verse 13. It'll only take me 3 seconds. Just out of curiosity, because, then we could see what the Ziz bird actually feeds on, supposedly. Might just be cattle, might be nothing exciting, but let's find out. So Psalms 80. Psalms 80. Go verse 13. Of course, I've got it in Jewish. I want to put it back into English, please. Okay, so 80 verse 13. Come on. Computers. Okay, let's see. What is the "it" referring to? Password, I plucked it or replaced it. Oh, okay. Ah. He's talking about a vine. No way. Wow. In Psalms 80 verse 7. I'll just read it. It says, "God of hosts, turn us back and cause thy face to shine, and we are saved. A vine out of Egypt thou dost bring. Thou dost cast out nations and plantest it. Thou dost look before it and dost root it, and it filled the land. Covered have been hills with its shadow, and its boughs are cedars of God. It sendeth forth its branches unto the sea, and unto the river its sucklings. Why hast thou broken down its hedges, and all passing by the way have plucked it? And this is where it says the next verse, where it says, the boar from the forest ravages it, the vine, and the ziz sadeh feeds on it. Is this saying that the ziz bird is going to turn on mankind, or even Israel? That's what it seems to be saying. That's interesting. I wasn't prepared for that. Now, the Jewish Aggadot, which is like a book of scripture, basically saying, speaks of the Ziz. As Leviathan is king of the fishes, or creatures in the sea, so the Ziz is appointed to rule over the birds, or any aerial creature, right? His name comes from the variety of taste that his flesh has. It tastes like this, zeh, and like that, zeh. The Ziz is as monstrous of size as Leviathan himself. And then they go off the deep end and say that he can rest his ankles on the earth and his head reaches to the very sky. Well, actually, no, that might not be, taking description to a goofy level. And hey there, sorry, I missed the comment. They only appear up on the screen for like a quarter second. If you're a little person looking up at this giant bird, it would look like the head was in the sky. So I guess in all fairness, right? In all fairness, I guess it's not a far-fetched description. It says, it once happened, well, that's one of the far-fetched tales. They said that these Jewish guys were in a boat a long time ago, and they saw the ziz bird standing in some water somewhere, and they thought, oh, this water must be shallow because the water is not coming far up the bird's legs. So when they get closer to the bird and they go to strike anchor or get out of the boat, whatever it was extremely deep. So, but like I said, unfortunately in Jewish, like mythological stuff, they usually embellish things and exaggerate things. Like the size of Og. They noted Og as being absolutely massive. Oh, hey there, Chewy. Good stuff, man. Oh yeah, you haven't missed too much, really, not really. This won't be a particularly long stream anyway, so yeah, that's that story there. But then here's something a little bit more interesting here. It says that oh, and hey there, Carrie. It says the Ziz has another name, the Renanin, because he is the celestial singer. On account of his relation to the heavenly regions, he is also called Sekwi, the seer, and besides, he is also called son of the nest, because his fledgling birds break away from the shell without being hatched by the mother bird. They spring directly from the nest, as it were, full stop. Like Leviathan, so Ziz is a delicacy to be served to the pious, to the righteous, right? At the end of time, to compensate them for the privations which abstaining from the unclean fowls imposed upon them. The creation of the fifth day, the animal world rules over the celestial spheres. Without the Ziz, witness the Ziz, which can darken the sun with its pinions. So here we see a very interesting allusion to the phoenix, right? Most people know generally the legend about the phoenix, that it doesn't die, or it doesn't appear to, well, it does die, but it's immortal, that's what I should say. When it dies, the legend says that the phoenix bird, which lives for like 500 years or whatever, that it will reduce itself down via intense heat, right? Some say with flames, some just say with intense heat, and the bird dies down, and it's kind of like sublimed itself into a new creature, like a little worm, and that little worm eventually grows up into the new phoenix. Now, depending on what culture you're looking at, the Greeks and the Egyptians, they didn't describe the phoenix bird as being a titan-sized creature. As far as I remember, they never described it like that. In Egypt, they called it the Bennu bird, and it would come to Egypt every 500 years and come and land on the obelisk of Ra, right? When the bird first did this, and I think this is actually great testimony to something real behind all this Egyptian mythology, right? They really did see a fantastic, one-of-a-kind bird with fantastic colors and plumage and whatever, and it would only come once every 500 years. It seemed to have a very different type of personality about it. And it would land on this obelisk. The first time it landed on the obelisk, to the Egyptians, that's where they conceived of all the symbology of how this bird is linked to Ra, their sun god, on how the bird is a sign for immortality because the bird doesn't die. So to me, they made a natural observation early on and then started to base their mythology upon it, if you see what I mean. So I think the creature was real. Too many world cultures talk about it. And I don't mean just the phoenix, but this mysterious bird in general. And, I mean, masonry, I mean, Freemasonry, the symbolism of the phoenix. I mean, that goes without saying. I don't even need to speak on that. Everybody knows that Masons are knee deep into phoenix mythology and stuff, right? So it is definitely some type of link to immortality. And what I find interesting is that the flesh of Leviathan, like I said, is supposed to convey immortality to the eater. So, I mean, you also have to keep in mind, this isn't taking away from the tree of life, okay? Nobody could even prove anyways if God's going to give us a real fruit to eat that will make us immortal. I would rather believe God could just make you immortal, where your translated body will just be immortal by nature. You see what I mean? But it could be that, the food we eat now, the fruit we eat now, kind of replenishes your life, right? But to a small degree, it's got vitamins, different life-giving compounds, right? There might be divine fruit that used to exist here that doesn't anymore, or exists in higher worlds or higher realms like paradise. And that fruit there has got more than just vitamins. You see what I mean? It replenishes your whole body. So it's not that you necessarily need it to be immortal because you're an immortal anyways. God made you an immortal. But it's just an accessory. You know what I mean? It's just, you see what I mean? So I think that's what it is. And plus also you have the great debate. Was the fruit that bestows immortality, was it really a fruit anyways? Because in the book of Proverbs, it says that wisdom is a tree of life. Okay, so the fruit of wisdom is what gives you immortality. And that's interesting as well. So you don't know, and it could be a dualistic thing. Both could be true. They could just be a coexisting parallel. You see what I mean? But nobody can really prove. So there's no point really speculating on all of that. But I think it's fair to say, just using logic, that when you get into the heavenly realms, you eat for pleasure, and I mean, I'm sure you might still get injured or whatever from things, but you would heal faster or better, and you drink fruit punch down here, you eat a delicious watermelon down here. Up in heaven, when you eat the watermelon or the divine fruit, it heals your whole body. You know what I mean? I don't think that's far-fetched. I think it's quite realistic. But the Leviathan and the Ziz bird, these are unusual creatures, right? I don't know if they came from higher realms, or I don't know, but it is unusual that the flesh of the Ziz and the flesh of the Leviathan have this like immortality type essence to them. The creatures themselves, Leviathan and Ziz, they don't really ever die, right, by themselves. And then God and Jesus will have to kill them on the final day, or in the final days, sorry. But when the great feast happens, it says that, let me pull up the scripture here. Let's see. The Jewish scriptures say that the skin of Leviathan is like very glorious. It almost changes color, reflects light very brilliantly, and it just looks really fantastic, right? And it emits light almost. And we know from the scriptures that Leviathan's eyes glow in the dark, that they emit light. And that when Leviathan swims through the deep, it says that it like glows around him, right? And that's why it says, one would think, if you're looking at Leviathan swimming in the depths of the ocean, that the ocean was full of light, which is hoary, right? The word hoary. And the scripture, I'll just talk as I'm opening up the verse. The Jewish scriptures say that the skin of Leviathan will be used to make the tents of congregation and stuff when the great feast is happening. So once Leviathan has been killed by God and Messiah, the skin's taken off, and it's this beautiful, brilliant light of all these glorious colors, and then we all sit under the tents and we have the great messianic feast, right? So let's go. For Leviathan, it's Psalms 74 verse 14. It says, "Thou hast broken the heads of Leviathan, thou makest him food for the people of the dry places. Even though that's very slight, even though it's like a one-liner, that's a pretty significant one-liner, right? And I think God made it so elusive like this for a reason. Leviathan is somewhere on this earth, and he probably doesn't want people finding it. Same with the Ziz, same with Behemoth. The Jewish legends say that Behemoth is hidden in between these great mountain chains somewhere that man can't access. Leviathan is down in the trenches somewhere in one of the great depths of the ocean. The Ziz bird? I don't know. But if there is some uncanny parallel to the Godzilla movies, and that doesn't have to be as weird as you think, right? I've always been a firm believer that I can't put this into words, right? But say you're somebody like inventing something like a movie, or you're writing a book, you're going to draw inspiration from the universe, for lack of better terms, right? And the things you conceive of, some of them are actually real, if you see what I mean. It's like you're subconsciously tapping into the blueprint of the universe, if you see what I mean. I also believe that God can give hints to people as well for various purposes. So I think it's entirely possible, as crazy as it sounds, that the people who are conceiving of Godzilla, Rodan, and all these crazy giant monsters, that either they had read these myths first, that might just be the case, or they were inspired like that, whether from God or from the universe. Because in the movies, Rodan was like in a state of prolonged slumber within a mountain. Like he had been asleep for so long, and these giant creatures supposedly sleep for thousands of years or whatever, right? And they can go without food for thousands of years. So he slept for so long that a mountain just built up around him. I'm pretty sure that was the story of Rodan. I would never forget being a child and watching that scene when Rodan first awakens from the mountain. The mountain's like falling apart and all of that stuff there. Also, I think different movies do different things. I know in another movie, I think it was an egg that came down from space. But in either case, it could be that the Ziz bird is just away in some crazy mountain range somewhere. Maybe in a big cave, maybe he's high. I don't know. I don't know. But it's in the Bible. It is in the Bible. And obviously, these creatures cannot be destroyed by man or angels. They have to be destroyed by God. And why would God create such huge, magnificent creatures? You have to stop and think about this. Why would he even make them? Just for fun? For sport? They must have a purpose. And when do they walk the earth? The end days. So their purpose has to be the end days, right? Now, if God's going to kill them, their purpose can't be to be born to be killed. That doesn't make sense. So whatever they're doing in the end days has to be related to their purpose. Yeah, thanks, man. Appreciate it. Definitely appreciate it, man. A little compliment goes a long way. Otherwise, I wouldn't hear any feedback from people and just think people think I'm crazy or something. But, what was I saying? Yeah, so that's the only problem I have. When I check the comments, I usually lose my train of thought. I know all the other things I want to say. One sec. There we go. Now remember, their purpose. If they're going to be walking around at the end times, their purpose has to be related to that. So were they created to help destroy mankind? I don't know. Were they created to only attack the evil ones? That could be a possibility. I know in my prophetic dreams, I don't really want to mention this because it's not really scripture and stuff. Very quickly in my prophetic dreams, I've experienced the Leviathan a ton of times. I put that in the video series that I made. And it's safe to say, just from based on what I experienced in my prophetic dream, that Leviathan is there to basically torment the bad people. I don't mean literally torment, but I just mean he's not there to afflict good people. He's there as part of the destructive force and the woe and the anguish that's going on. Like, Leviathan represents destruction. And I wonder if Leviathan is Abaddon. I don't know. Abaddon means destruction, right? Abaddon comes from the pit. Where else is Leviathan going to come from? Maybe he does come crawling out of the ocean. It's entirely possible. But I've always wondered because, like in my dream, Leviathan is just so destructive. He destroys everything just by walking around. He doesn't even have to think or do anything. Just walk through the city and it's destroyed. I mean, he represents destruction. But, oh, their purpose could be as well that we're going to feast on them. And I think that rings a bell, actually. It's either in a Jewish scripture or possibly the book of Enoch. I'm pretty sure it says somewhere that these great beasts were prepared for the end days for that great meal. It could very well be. That would be very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. And Isaiah 27 verse 1 is linked to Psalm 74:14 I just read. It says, in that day, which is talking about the end days, in that day lay a charge, does Jehovah, with his sword, the sharp and the great and the strong, on Leviathan, a fleeing serpent, and on Leviathan, a crooked serpent, and he has slain the dragon that is in the sea. Well, I guess that's fair to say Leviathan probably will be coming from the ocean then. So maybe Abaddon isn't. But nonetheless, that's quite incredible stuff here, right? That's a biblical prophecy. These two are biblical prophecies that we're going to see a great titan monster, a kaiju war at the end of days. That's pretty cool. It's scary when I go through to my dream, don't get me wrong. You wish you were dead, but it's pretty cool in retrospect. So let's go take a quick look at, because there's still a good amount of information here I can go over. Oh, yeah, I got to talk a bit more about the phoenix. And I talked about how, like, in Greek and Egyptian, it was a smaller bird, lots of glorious colors and all of that there. And you also have to keep in mind, this bird only came around like every 500 years or something like that. So people, when it came around, it's not like the whole world saw it, right? And wrote encyclopedias about it. So when people did see the creature, it was very elusive. Probably only a few people saw it. So you have to factor in Chinese whispers. You see what I mean? So that's probably why from country to country, culture to culture, the description changed a little bit. But generally speaking, the main things were important. Greeks and Egyptians took away the giant size and the fact that it like spits lightning and stuff, but they gave it the glorious colors and beauty and the immortality, and it's linked to like the higher realms or whatever, the celestial realms, however they conceive of it, right? Whereas the other cultures, like Native American, which I'm going to get into, the Middle Eastern cultures, like the Hindu culture, which spread out into, Buddhists came from Hindu, and most people think Buddhism is like tiny, but if you look at Asia, most of the Asian countries, like the continent of Asia, okay, and now most of Asia is like Christian because of the Russians, but before then, they had shamanistic peoples, right? But ignoring the top part of Russia, the whole middle section and lower section of Asia, sorry, I keep saying Russia, of Asia, you have China, you have Mongolia, like all those Asian countries, even the little island type countries going out, Philippines, Thailand, Cambodia, all of those countries, that's a huge portion of the earth. All these Asian countries, their religions either were directly Hinduism or they came from Hinduism, right? And I mean very directly. Not like indirectly they started their own type of religion, like it was Hinduism. And Buddhism came from Hinduism. It was like a side branch, an apostate side branch. Even Hinduism teaches it's apostate because Buddhism doesn't believe in God, right? Whereas at least Hinduism does. But Buddhism spread. It went out from India and it went out to China, Nepal, all those countries as talked about, right? All the way up through, even over to Japan, right? And down to all those other Asian countries in the Pacific Ocean and everything, right? Cambodia has Hindu temples, right? My point is, like, most people overlook that, right? But they had a big influence. So the point of me saying that is a huge chunk of the world believed that same, religious doctrine, cultural doctrine, right? And in Hinduism, /plus Buddhism, you have the talk of the Garuda bird, okay? And the Garuda bird was a massive, giant bird, and some descriptions say it was actually part man, part bird, but which is identical to the paradox type description that Native Americans give the Thunderbirds. The Thunderbirds, some tribes, they say they're part people, part bird. You ask another tribe, they're just people that wear like technological wings that fly around, which I find fascinating. You ask another tribe, they say they were literally giant birds. Okay, is there a combination of all three? That could be a possibility too. But a striking, and I mean striking, similarity between the Ziz bird, the Simurgh from Persia, like the Middle Eastern countries, like the Anzu, all these other ones from like the Middle Eastern countries. Then you get over into India and all the Buddhist countries, right, all across Asia. They all believed in the Garuda. And all of these creatures, the giant birds, their primary food and enemy were giant reptiles. In North America, there almost every tribe has tales of the giant birds. Okay, and the giant birds, their number one prey and enemy were the giant reptiles, either giant lizards, dragons, giant serpents. Another thing that's seen around the world in all these cultures is the talk of the rainbow serpent, which is a giant serpent, or whether it had legs or not, I don't know for sure. Native Americans have some of the most confusing, contradictory, each tribe twists one little thing and contradicts the other on something, makes it so confusing. But almost all of them describe these giant birds that would attack dragons. Oh, sorry, I went off track there, right? I'm talking about the rainbow serpent. They would almost all describe the rainbow serpent the same way, as this giant serpent. Some would say that it had a crest or a frill on its head. Some would say that it had feathers. Some would say it just had scales. Some would say it could fly. Some would say it lived in the water and could come out on land. So you had all these different, that's what I meant, like little tiny contradictions. But the common denominator is a giant serpentine type reptile with gorgeous color changing skin. Like a lot of creatures, like birds, like peacocks, starlings, they have color changing feathers. Depending on what angle you look at, you get the whole chromatic peacock effect, right? It's very beautiful. And reptiles can have this too. Even the most boring little mundane lizards, like where I live, when you look at them up close, they're not just green. Their tails are blue, magenta, purple, indigo. I mean, the most beautiful colors, right? And when you look at their skin up close, it's got all these different colors. And you just look from a distance, it looks green. So all these cultures talk about the giant rainbow serpents as looking like this, a very like chromatic type, whether feathers or scales. And this rainbow serpent is seen in Africa. In all the not all though, but all these African tribes talk about the rainbow serpent, describe it basically the same way. And a lot of these tribes as well, some would say that the snake had giant horns, or the dragon, whatever it might be, had giant horns on its head. And moving over from Africa, like I said, Asia's full of that. Go look at any one of the Buddhist or Hindu temples, like in Angkor Wat in Cambodia, and even in the pyramids, all the different North American and South American tribes. What do you always see at the pyramids? You see the giant feathered serpents, the Nagas, they called them in Asia. The Nagas had what? They had horns, they had frills, they could fly. Some of them could change shape, they could change color. It's the same creature around the world. And these people were separated by thousands of miles and continents and great bodies of water. They had no way to communicate with each other. There's absolutely no way. And I'm sorry, like some people talk about like this panspermia of ideas, where you get one guy in a boat turning up to a country and he's like, oh, here, I'm going to tell you all my fables from my land. And then you think everybody in North America is going to convert to believing all this guy's fables? I don't believe that, because they try to say like a Phoenician came over on a boat and spread this mythology and these ideas. I don't believe that for a second. Some foreigner came to your land telling you a whole pile of crazy stuff you never heard before. You're probably going to kill him, chase him away, or just ignore him. You're not going to convert your whole nation to believe it for the rest of time. So I really believe that the people around the world separated, saw these creatures because they were real. And the rainbow serpents, even in Australia, okay, and the rainbow serpent is in Russia as well. It's everywhere. It's around the world. Okay, we know dragons were in legends around the world. Were dragons dinosaurs? Were they related? Who knows? But there were giant reptiles, and the enemies of the giant reptiles were the giant birds. Thunderbirds in North America, and in North America the thunderbirds were famous for shooting lightning. Sounds wacky, right? Too many tribes spoke about it for it to be wacky to me. It's the same description that's found in a lot of the other, world cultures, talking about the giant Ziz bird type thing as well. And oddly enough, in the Godzilla movies, Rodan shoots lightning. If I'm not mistaken, I could be getting confused with Geos from the Gamera movies, but same thing. Geos was a giant bird, thunderbird type thing that shot this from his mouth. So they could have been taking inspiration from these ancient cultural things. But the Native Americans would say that the thunderbirds were very elusive. They'd only come out once in a while, and they're more ancient times as well. We don't really see them anymore, of course. But they would come out and destroy and eat the giant reptiles, giant snakes, the rainbow serpents, the dragons. They would always be doing battle. If you go look at the Thunderbird artwork, actually in North American tradition, most tribes consider the Thunderbird so sacred you're not even allowed to talk about it or draw it. Okay, it's taboo for any Westerner to even see a picture of it. They're that sacred to them, and I think it's because even though the most North American tribes, they're shamanistic or pagan to whatever extent some of them might have had monotheism and whatever, right? But unfortunately, a lot of them were deep into the shamanistic type practice, right? And they kind of went downhill there, but I kind of went off topic there. Let me get back to what I was saying. These tribes would say that the Thunderbirds would shoot lightning, okay? Lightning from, I think, their mouths. But I don't know. I can't understand it. Okay, but that they would shoot lightning. They would also be able to create storms or even rain and stuff like that. And that might sound bonkers to people. But after thinking about it long enough, I thought if there really was a bird that large, creature that large, if it flapped its wings, it would change the air pressure completely. It would change the air temperature. And air pressure and temperature is what creates weather. And all these legends talk about these creatures, when they turn up, they could flap their wings. And even the giant dragon creatures as well, right? Like the water serpents and stuff, the ones that have big wings. If you notice in all the world cultures, right, dragons are almost always noted with bodies of water. And all the cultures around the world almost always say that they can influence weather, basically, right? They can create storms. It's not because these creatures have superpowers. It's because they're so huge, right? If you're a big reptilian beast and you're in a little lake, when you splash around, you're going to cause a flood. You see what I mean? You could push all the water out of that lake. If you got big enough wings and you flap your wings, hey, they'll block out the sun. You could cause a gust so big it'll blow a village over. You know what I mean? Maybe not that extreme. But if you're flapping in the air, what's it going to sound like? It's going to sound like thunder. Like if you wave like a board of formica, that stuff for like countertops back in the day, you can make that fake thunder sound, right? Or like a sheet of metal. If you had giant wings and you flap your wings, it's going to sound like thunderclaps. Even just from the sonic booms alone, right? And they called them the Thunderbirds for that reason. They flapped their wings, they created thunder. And if you're flapping your wings like that, displacing all the air and just changing all the air current, air pressure, and air temperature, I wouldn't doubt that you could influence the weather to some degree. I don't think that the bird just snaps his fingers and it starts raining, you know what I mean? But it could influence the change of the weather entirely. And that's pretty interesting. And I would only give credence to this theory if multiple cultures talked about it, which they do, right? And in like Asia and India and all of that there, strikingly, the Garuda bird was said to destroy the Nagas, the serpents, the dragons, all of them with lightning. Same thing, okay, the same thing. I can't remember offhand about down in Australia, right? But I can't know and remember everything. But the thing that we see as a precedent around the world is these giant birds using some form of energy, electricity or lightning, however they do it, who knows, to kill off these giant reptiles. And look at Leviathan. What is Leviathan? A giant reptile. And in all these mythologies, you would see in the artwork the giant bird attacking this dragon or giant reptile. That's like a thing you see around the world. And that's what we could be seeing at this end days battle. The Ziz might actually attack Leviathan. Leviathan might be the biggest reptile it's ever seen, but it's going to want to instinctively attack it. So I just have a feeling we're going to see that ancient battle between bird and reptile repeated. And actually, now that I say that, it's also true that in nature today, birds and reptiles are like enemies. A lot of people think birds are little fluffy, not fluffy, but little cute, fluffy, innocent creatures. No, birds are ruthless, man. Birds are vicious. Birds are dinosaurs, right? A lot of dinosaurs had bird feathers. Dinosaurs are more bird than reptile. And those things were ferocious, man. Like the cassowary bird is basically a velociraptor. It cuts your guts out with a giant toe claw. It is a velociraptor. Like, it is, right? Even velociraptors had feathers. And, like, you have what is it? The roadrunner bird hunts snakes. All these different types of birds go after snakes. It's like a template you see in nature. So to me, that makes perfect sense that you have a giant bird. This can go after giant reptiles. You see what I mean? That's pretty cool. But linking it back to the phoenix and stuff, I don't think I have unless it's in one of these other pages here, I don't think I have the Jewish scripture where it talks about the ziz bird's flesh having that quality. But from what I remember reading, because it was just earlier today, the bird, because well, how literal this is or not, I don't know. I'm just repeating what I read. But the ziz bird has some type of connection to the higher higher worlds, higher realms, whatever, and has this kind of like immortal nature to it, right? And so it's because, figuratively speaking, that it's going up to these higher worlds that has been imbued with this immortal nature. And this is a strong tie to the phoenix, right? And that's what is said about the ziz. So when you eat the ziz's flesh, you get part of that nature imbued into you. I don't remember hearing anybody eating the phoenix bird before. The phoenix bird, Greek and Egyptian, was always so elusive, right? Only like the best priests, few choice people would ever see it because they knew where to go to see it at the right time. But it can't be a coincidence. It cannot be a coincidence. Now, let me read some more here. Cut down my waffling. Yeah, this is interesting. It says here that non-Jews also knew of the ziz. Johannes Buxtorf's, that's a name, Buxtorf's 1603 Synagoga Judaica discusses the ziz. His text is echoed in English by Samuel Purchas in 1613. Elias Luita reporteth of a huge bird, also called Bariuchne, to be roasted at this feast, of which the Talmud saith that an egg sometime fell out of her nest, did overthrow and break down 300 tall cedar trees, with which the egg being broken overflowed and carried away 60 villages. But to take view of another strange creatures make room. I pray for another rabbi with his bird, and a great deal of room you will say is requisite. Rabbi Kimchi on the 50th Psalm is written in old style English where they have like weird letters and E's everywhere. Rabbi Kimchi on the 50th Psalm, Urith. I've never heard of this word. Auerref. I can only assume it means like uttereth. But Urith out of Rabbi saying on the sea, saw a bird in the middle of the sea so high that the water reached but to her knees. Oh, that's the one I skipped before. And Humphrey Prideaux in 1698 describes the ziz as being like a giant celestial rooster. From the tract Bava Bathra of the Babylonish Talmud, we have a story of a prodigious bird called Ziz. When standing with his feet upon the earth, reaches up to the heavens with his head, and with the spreading of his wings darkeneth the whole orb of the sun, and causeth a total eclipse thereof. This bird, the Chaldee paraphrased in the psalm says, is a cock, a rooster, which he describes of the same bigness, and tells us that he crows before the Lord. And the Chaldee paraphrased on Job also tells us of him, and of his crowing every morning before the Lord, and that God giveth him wisdom for this purpose. Weird. But chickens and cockerels and roosters are actually a species of jungle fowl, right? In the same family as peacocks, ironically. They have beautiful color, like even boring roosters that people see, they have color changing feathers too. Which, it all links back to all this stuff here. So let's go over and read about the Bar Duchne. Bar Duchne's probably got the exact same description. Yeah, it's got the exact same description. The rock. Let's read the description of the rock. The roc from Persian, also known as the ruck or rux, is an enormous legendary bird of prey in the popular mythology of the Middle East. The roc appears in Arabic geographies and natural history, popularized in Arabian fairy tales and sailors' folklore. Ibn Battuta tells of a mountain hovering in the air over the China Seas, which was the roc. The story collection 1001 Nights includes tales of, can you pronounce the name, Abd al Rahman and Sinbad the Sailor, both of which include the roc. It's not worth me reading all throughout this here, I don't think. I mean, it's linked to so many other creatures as well, like the Simurgh from Persia. Each one might be described a little tiny bit different. Even in the Philippines, they have something called the Manakawa, a giant dragon-like bird, related to eclipses. Same thing again. They say that the Manakawa lives in outer space. That's just like that's like the Godzilla movie. I swear, the people who made the Godzilla movies must have studied all this ancient mythology before they made them. Right? It comes from space. That's like I said, Rodan. In one movie, Rodan's egg fell down from space with a meteor. There was another movie, might be the same movie, King Ghidorah, the giant three-headed dragon. He's a space dragon. He comes down from space as well. It's Godzilla who's the earthbound Leviathan. And there were some people linking the Ziz to cherubs. We know that there are two cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant. And, this is a whole different ballgame here, but I find it interesting. I don't know whether I can believe it. We do know from Ezekiel, he describes the cherubim, and they don't sound like the Ziz. But a few scholars have said that the Ziz could be linked to the cherubim. If they're not the same creature, they could be from the same world. Very, very bizarre, but I just thought it's worth mentioning. And even Melek Tos, from the Yazidi religion, is known as the peacock angel. I mean, that's a loose tie to it. But the Garuda, let me read a little bit about the Garuda, like I said, from India and Asia. It says the Garuda is a legendary bird or bird-like creature in Hindu, Buddhist, and Jain mythology. He is variously the vehicle mount Vahana of the Hindu god Vishnu, a Dharma protector, and Astasina in Buddhism, and the Yaksha of the Jain. Can't even pronounce that word. I know that Yaksha is a race of demons from Hinduism, and because Buddhism is kind of like the antithesis, or it's like the opponent to Hinduism, it's like the anti-god religion. They would have everything twisted backwards. You see what I mean? So in Buddhism, they literally worship devils and demons, and they get magic powers from them. That's why those Buddhist people can do crazy magic stuff, and they have superpowers, can sit in boiling oil. It's because they're getting powers from demons, right? Hinduism preaches out against that at least. But the Jain religion is another religion that came from Hinduism, right? And each one here you can see that in the Hindu religion, the Garuda is noted as a good figure because it goes around and destroys the Nagas, the giant dragons, and the serpents and stuff like that there. So it's associated with righteousness and God. In the Jain religion, it's related to the Yaksha, which is more like a demon. So each culture, because of Chinese whispers, slightly changes certain aspects of the thing. Long story short, the Garuda, let's keep reading. The Garuda is described as the king of birds and a kite-like figure, which means like an eagle. He is shown either in zoomorphic form, giant bird with partially open wings, or in anthropomorphic form, man with wings and some bird features. This is the same kind of paradox discrepancy that we see in North America, where some tribes say that the thunderbird was a giant bird. Some tribes say that it was part man, part bird. You see what I mean? And going on, it says, Garuda is generally a protector with the power to swiftly go anywhere, ever watchful, and an enemy of the serpent. He is also known as Tarkishya. And I think Garuda might have some more interesting stuff here, so... It does say here in Hinduism that, and maybe this is why in the Philippines they believe that their Manakwa, whatever they call it, is a space creature. It says here that the Garuda actually is a heavenly creature. It says celestial diva, which means a being from the celestial regions, right? That's quite interesting. It says that the Shatapatha Brahmana embedded inside the Yajurveda text mentions Garuda as the personification of courage. It's also, this just popped into my head, could be nothing, but in the Bible we talk about Mount Israel on eagle's wings and stuff like that there. It's kind of creepy. Um, yeah, in the Lord of the Rings movies, which is written by a Freemason, at the end, the salvation to the people came on the back of giant eagles. Interesting. Could be meaningless ironies, but maybe the Ziz won't be mankind's enemy. I don't know, but some people seem to think that we eat the Ziz. So, it wouldn't be too nice if a giant creature helps you and then you kill it and eat it. So, I don't think people have a clear understanding about everything yet. I think God wanted to be mysterious like this. Even in the book of Enoch, it says that when he created Behemoth and Leviathan, that they were so powerful, he got rid of their spouse counterparts so that they couldn't reproduce. And he hid them away because if he let them loose in the world, they'd destroy everything. And they're being let loose on the end day to, I guess, destroy everything. So, yeah. Let's read on about Garuda here. Oh, wow. Obviously, this is an exaggeration, but it says in the epics in Hinduism, when Garuda flaps its wings, it can stop the spinning of the heavens, the earth, and hell. That's obviously not literal. Even in their own text, they're not that goofy. So it's probably like a metaphor, but we can see probably an allusion to controlling weather at least, right? Now, skipping through this massive stuff here. Ooh. Oh my gosh, no way, man. I didn't even have this plan. It talks about it living 500 years, I'm pretty sure. Hold on. Okay. Alright, cool. I'll just read the whole chunk out. Garuda mythology is linked to that of Varuna, the charioteer of Surya. However, these Indian mythologies are different, inconsistent across the text. Both Aruna and Garuda developed from the egg. According to one version, states George Williams, Kashyapa, Prajapati's two wives. By the way, Kashyapa Prajapata was essentially like a being that came down here and created life. Not like God or anything, but I think if you were to apply it biblically, that this would probably be like one of the Benai Elohim who came here to do work. I mean, it could be like an angel or an archangel type of thing. But he was a big shot, Kashyapa, or he was in charge of a lot of stuff. He was like a shot caller. So he had two wives, Vinata and Kadru, and they wanted to have children. So Kashyapa granted them a boon, which is like not a wish, but it's like he grants you something like a reward. So Kadru asked for 1,000 Naga sons. Nagas are the reptilian race, right? And Vinata wanted two sons, each equal to Kadru's 1,000 Naga sons. Now Nagas are like the enemy in Hinduism, right? Kind of like Christianity, where you have like the serpent, the dragon, the serpent man, right? Same thing with that there, and that So one of the wife wanted 1,000 Naga children. That ain't too kosher, right? The other one seems to be a little bit wiser, and she just wanted two children, each who would be as strong as the 1,000, right? So it says that Kashyapa blessed them, and then went away to a forest to meditate. Later, Kadru gave birth to 1,000 eggs, while Vinata gave birth to 2 eggs. These incubated for 500 years, a parallel to the phoenix that lived for 500 years. Very interesting. Upon which Kadru's eggs broke open, and out came her 1,000 sons. So Kadru, I'm pretty sure, is the progenitor of the Naga race. That's also interesting. These were the Anunnaki. Okay, Kashyapa was an Anunnaki. And not all, but many of them possess shape-shifting ability, and it even actually said, I omitted it, in an above text it said that Garuda could shapeshift. So, there you go. And when Vinata eager for her 2 sons, impatiently broke open one of the eggs, from which emerged the partially formed Aruna, who looked radiant and reddish as the morning sun, but not as bright as the midday sun. Aruna chided his mother for breaking him open early, Venata for her impatience since he was born without legs, and warned her not to break open the second egg but wait. Aruna then left to become the charioteer of Surya, the sun god. Venata waited, and after many years the second egg hatched and Garuda was born. Garuda later went to war with his stepbrothers, the Nagas. Some myths present Garuda as so massive that he can block out the sun. The text Garuda Purana is named after him. And Garuda is presented in the Mahabharata mythology as one who eats snake meat, such as the story about him planning to kill and eat the Sumaka snake where Indra attempts to intervene. Garudas are also separately a race of birds which eat snakes in the same books. That's pretty interesting. Let's see. I'll read this one last part here. Throughout the Mahabharata, Garuda is invoked as a symbol of impetuous, violent force, of speed, and of martial prowess. Powerful warriors advancing rapidly on doomed foes are likened to Garuda swooping down on a serpent. Defeated warriors are like snakes beaten down by Garuda. The Mahabharata character Drona uses a military formation named after Garuda, and Krishna carries the image of Garuda on his banner. I'll restart that music. So, I keep reading some more, but generally speaking, we've got enough here. Like giant bird, they kill giant reptiles, giant dragons, giant snakes, which ties all back to the end times great kaiju battle. So I want to kind of keep this stream shorter, so let me close down some of these windows and see if I can kind of sum things up. Yeah, I've only got one text left to read from a Jewish resource, and yeah, I'll read this here. It says, according to a midrash, the Leviathan was created on the 5th day. Originally, God produced a male and female Leviathan, but lest in multiplying the species should destroy the world, he slew the female, reserving her flesh for the banquet that will be given to the righteous on the advent of the Messiah. The enormous size of the Leviathan is thus illustrated by R. Yohanan, another one of their stories. I'll skip that. The body of the Leviathan, especially his eyes, possesses great illuminating power. Here we go. And it's linked to the Messianic times. Leviathan is prominent in the Haggadic literature in connection with the advent of the Messiah, referring to Job XL30 Hebrew. You have to understand the Hebrew Bible, the verse numbers are a little bit different because when they translated and got the New Testament, all that, they changed some of the numbers around, unfortunately. So sometimes it's a verse off. But in Job XL30, and the pious one shall make a banquet of it. R. Yohanan says that at the time of the resurrection, a banquet will be given by God to the righteous, at which the flesh of the Leviathan will be served. Even the hunting of the Leviathan will be a source of great enjoyment to the righteous. That's interesting. Those, says R. Judin Bar Simon, who have not taken part in pagan sports will be allowed to participate in the hunting of Leviathan and of the Behemoth. Gabriel will be charged with the killing of the monster, but he will not be able to accomplish his task without the help of God, who will divide the monster with his sword. This is Behemoth, remember, not Leviathan. According to another Haggadah, when Gabriel fails, God will order the Leviathan to engage in a battle with the ox of the mountain, the Behemoth, which will result in the death of both of them. Not only will the flesh of Leviathan furnish food for the table of the righteous, but there will be a great supply of it in the markets of Jerusalem. From the hide of the Leviathan, God will make tents for the pious of the first rank, girdles for those of the second, chains for those of the third, and necklaces for those of the fourth. The remainder of the hide he will spread on the walls of Jerusalem, and the whole world will be illuminated by its brightness. Oh, it's even got good Jewish resource, man. Jews are pretty cool. They got the book Enoch on here. Read from that too, actually. That's quite convenient. Both Leviathan and Behemoth are prominent in Jewish, I can't pronounce this word, eschatology. In the book of Enoch, LX 7-9, Enoch says, So many brackets and everything. On that day, the day of judgment, two monsters will be produced. A female monster. The day of judgment. Let's stress that. On that day, the day of judgment, two monsters will be produced. So they will emerge in the final days. That's like confirmation. A female monster named Leviathan to dwell in the depths of the ocean over the fountains of the waters, but the male is called Behemoth. Wait a second. I'm having a little revelation here. I will trust the book of Enoch over what, no disrespect, what some rabbis got together and pondered over one night. Remember what it said earlier, that he separated, but it lest in multiplying the species should destroy the world, he slew the female, reserving her flesh for the banquet. So the rabbis are saying that there were two Leviathans, two Behemoths. They kind of think they're two separate creatures. We go down to the book of Enoch. The book of Enoch says that Behemoth is one and Leviathan's its spouse. So the rabbis could be partially correct that God did create them and separate them, but they're just not correct in saying that he killed one of their spouses each. So he might have created both, male and female, according to Enoch, and separated them like a world apart. That's pretty interesting. One in the ocean and one on land. It's fair to say that if there's one on land, it's got to be buried or inside a cavern or a mountain. It's just got to be. It can't be out in the open. If it's out in the open, just like Godzilla movies or whatever, it slept for so long that dirt built up around it ends up looking like a mountain. That's kind of freaky. So let's read on here. So, on that day, the day of judgment, two monsters will be produced. Female monster named Leviathan to dwell in the depths of the ocean over the fountains of the waters. But the male is called Behemoth, who occupies with his breast a waste wilderness called Dendane. Read the land. Oh, this is interesting. Jews always have extra info. Christians always fall behind on that for some reason. Read the land of Naid. N-A-I-D. Naid. I've never seen that before in all my studies. That's interesting. Because a lot of people wonder where Dendane is, right? On the east of the garden where the elect and the righteous dwell. The east of the garden. Well, the garden was in the Middle East. The east of it would be Pakistan and India. Wow. India's got a tail of a giant Leviathan dragon too. It's the same thing in like almost all the world cultures. So, wow. So this is saying that Behemoth is living over somewhere in that region. Maybe even Afghanistan. I don't know. I'd have to check a world map, right? But I'm pretty sure the scholars agree that you got the Tigris River, Euphrates River. The scholars even say that the Ganges in India is probably one of the four biblical rivers. And the other one I think was Sihon. Or Sihon, whatever it is. I can't remember if that's the one they say is the Ganges or not. But, I mean, basically, the scholars can't pinpoint a certain land area, right? But I've heard more scholars say that it was like Iraq, I think, or Iran. And I think Afghanistan is over to the side a little bit. I don't care enough to pull up a world map right now. It's to the east of the promise, of the ancient paradise. So let me catch my place again and keep reading. So on the east of the garden where the elect and the righteous dwell. That's interesting too. It's the elect and righteous dwell on the east of the garden. This is the book of Enoch saying that. Interesting. And I besought that other angel that he should show me the might of these monsters, how they were produced on one day. The one being placed in the depth of the sea, and the other, oh my gosh, this makes perfect sense. Oh my gosh, I'm having a little revelation here. The Leviathan verses, remember there's two. Psalm 74 talks about breaking the heads of Leviathan, making him for food. And it says him. And then in Isaiah 27 verse 1, it makes it sound like there's two Leviathans. It says, in that day lay a charge, does Jehovah with the sword to sharpen the great and the strong, on Leviathan, a fleeing serpent, and on Leviathan, a crooked serpent, and he has slain the dragon that is in the seas. I think it's fair to say that this is pointing out the Behemoth and the Leviathan, the male and the female, according to Enoch. One's in the sea, and he has slain the dragon that is in the sea. The one in the sea is probably the crooked one, because it swims. I'm only guessing. Oh. In nature, some creatures, the male and females, have different features. What if the male or female Leviathan has wings and the other doesn't? Or if one's more, you see what I mean? Maybe the male and female have different terrestrial or flying, aerial, terrestrial, or aquatic counterparts. That's very interesting. The Behemoth, if I remember correctly, is the male on land. That would be the fleeing serpent. And the crooked, I would say crooked's probably in the ocean and fleeing serpent's probably on the land. Does it really make a difference? I don't know. Alright, Chewy. Take care, man. Thanks for coming by. Oh, and hey there, Kata. That's really cool. Okay. I'm learning here. I'm learning here as I go. I didn't even prepare for this one. So continuing, it says, and he spake to me, thou son of man, does seek here to know what is hidden? Like, do you want to know what is hidden? That is very interesting. That is very, very interesting. Now, according to 2nd Ezra, VI 49-53, God created on the 5th day the two great monsters, Leviathan and Behemoth, and he separated them because the 7th part of the world, which was assigned to the water, could not hold them together. And he gave to the Behemoth that part which was dried up on the 3rd day. Ah, so it must be a desert area where Behemoth is. And had 1,000 mountains, which according to Psalms I-10 is understood by the Haggadis, the Behemoth upon 1,000 hills. It's quoting a bunch of different books. Furnished Behemoth with the necessary food. To the Leviathan God gave the 7th part of the earth filled with water, and he reserved it for the future to reveal by whom and at what time the Leviathan and the Behemoth should be eaten. In the Syriac Apocalypse of Baruch, XXIX4, also the time is predicted when the Behemoth will come forth from his seclusion on land and the Leviathan out of the sea. Well, I'm going to be reading that after this stream. Okay, the Syriac Apocalypse of Baruch. I read it before, but donkey's years ago. Let me start that off again. Also the time is predicted when the Behemoth will come forth from a seclusion on land and the Leviathan out of the sea, and the two gigantic monsters created on the 5th day will serve as food for the elect, and who will survive in the days of the Messiah. So that kind of proves my feeling that I had. That gut feeling I had. I think that God made these two creatures, one for food for the righteous, and maybe also to help give them whatever extra nourishment or powers, life, whatever, who knows, but for food and nourishment for the righteous. But he probably most likely did create them to cause destruction. Wow. Because it says here that they will serve as food for the elect who will survive in the days of the Messiah. Interesting. Hey, this is interesting too. It says here that Behemoth and Leviathan form in the Gnostic system of the Ophites. Now, Gnosticism is apostate. It's very stupid. But sometimes there can be truth in many things, if you see what I mean. Doesn't mean you have to believe that doctrine. They could have pieces of truth in it. Now, but Behemoth and Leviathan form in the Gnostic system of the Ophites. And I think Ophites are serpent worshippers, I think. And others, 2 of 7 circles or stations, which the soul has to pass in order to be purged and attain bliss. That's what I mean. They make everything overly esoteric and spiritual. But what they do say afterwards is interesting. It says, as if the meat of the wild Behemoth and the Leviathan were not deemed sufficient for the great banquet of the righteous in the future, a fowl was added, i.e. the Ziz. And these could be Jewish Gnostics, actually. I didn't consider that. I was thinking like Greek or Masonic Gnostics, but they could be Jewish Gnostics. It is possible. Because I think some of the branches of Kabbalah get into like a Gnostic type of belief system, right? I have heard from other Jewish sources that the Ziz will be part of the Great Feast as well. So that's what makes me think these are Jewish Gnostics. But nonetheless, I mean, who cares, right? I mean, I understand this. I can see this being believable, that God has also decreed that the giant Ziz bird, which we know is biblical, like I already read the 2 places in the Bible from Psalms, that this giant Ziz bird will be added. So you're going to have, oh, that is fitting when you think about it. God is going to be serving a sea creature. He's going to be serving, so he's going to have surf and turf. That's a bad joke, man. Surf and turf with some giant chicken. That is interesting. So he's going to have land, sea, and air. That's pretty cool. Now, thus the apocalypse of Simeon ben Yohai has the 3 animals, the monster Behemoth, the Leviathan, and the giant bird Ziz, prepared for the great banquet. This tradition, however, indicates Persian influence, for it is of the Parsi cosmology that the existence of such primeval representatives of the classes of animals is a part. That's a mouthful. There are 4 such species mentioned in Bundahis. Must be a book, I guess. The serpent-like fish, the Ariz of the water, the greatest of the creatures of Ahur Mazda, corresponding to the Leviathan, the 3-legged Kara standing in the midst of the ocean. It's going on describing what the Persian mythology talks about. There's too many long, complicated Persian words. Essentially, what it's saying is, in a chunk of text about this big, that Persia also has these 3 giant creatures: giant sea creature, giant land creature, giant air creature. That's essentially what it is, and that and here it says it is mentioned in the Talmud, which is Jewish, as blah 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 blah, a substitute for Behemoth and Leviathan. So it's saying that the Ziz meat will be a substitute for Behemoth and Leviathan. The ox hadhayosh, some Jewish word, from which the food of immortality is prepared, and which forms the parallel of Behemoth, and the bird chamrosh. So that's another word again. Another name for the Ziz bird is chamrosh. I'm going to have to research on that. And the bird chamrosh, the chief of the birds, which lives on the summit of Mount Alburz. Also compare the simurg, the giant fabulous bird with which the rabbis identified with the Ziz. That's what I mentioned earlier. The simurg is a Persian creature basically of the same description. So anyways, that was a huge chunk of text with a whole pile of confusing words, and I'm sorry that it sounded like a confusing mouthful of nonsense there. But long story short, the 3 creatures are going to be served up as flesh in the end days, like I said originally at the start of the stream. So that is very, very, very cool. Let me check my time. An hour 13. Yeah, so in conclusion, we have a surf and turf. We have a Leviathan in the sea who's going to come out. We have a Leviathan hiding somewhere in a region of 1,000 mountains, which is going to come out, the male and the female of the same species. And then we're going to have a massive giant bird called the Ziz appear from where? I don't know. And these 3 are going to come and they're going to do battle. That is awesome. And God is going to be here with his armies, with the Messiah, with the angels, Gabriel, and they're all going to do war against these giant creatures. That is going to be an awesome sight to behold. I really want to see that battle. I don't want to be one of the victims running around the feet of these giant things, but I would love to see that battle. It is absolutely awesome. So anyways, I really hope everybody enjoyed this stream. I could have been more prepared and had more stuff ready and sounded more professional, but I was just too excited. I don't always have time every day to waffle around. You know, I've got a couple hours after work to do stuff, so kind of a little bit rushed in this here, but not as prepared as I would like to be. But hopefully everybody find this entertaining. Like I said, I have a video I previously made on Leviathan, with all the scriptural references to Leviathan. I'll upload that at some point in the near future, in the next couple days or whatever. And yeah, so I hope everybody likes this. If you go out to do your own research, I can tell you now, you're only going to find the same things that I have, because there's not much out there on these creatures. There's very, very little. And I tried to gather all of it for my stream here today. So, just to let you know, but feel free to go out and look. I mean, I'm always looking every day. I look for the same stuff over and over again, because sometimes I've missed something, or there's something else hidden that I didn't know about. So, anyways, thank you all for coming. God bless you all. Thank you for coming by, Kata. And I think Chewy's gone already.